Welcome to My Big Safety Challenge, a podcast all about stories of safety leadership, presented by Dale Carnegie and the Board of Certified Safety Professionals.
Every place I've ever worked where they had employee surveys, one of the number one things that people would say is the management team doesn't communicate well enough. And oftentimes I'll talk to safety professionals, Jay, and they'll say, we have problems with communication. But it is so broad, nobody really wants to narrow it down. Today, we have a person who specializes in that, and we're ready to learn and take advantage of that.
We sure are. We are thrilled to welcome Michelle Gladieux. She is the founder of Gladieux Consulting and the author of the book, Communicate with Courage. Michelle, welcome to the podcast, Season 4, and we are thrilled to have you.
Hi, Jay. Hi, Beryl. Great to be here.
Michelle, how in the world did you ever learn that you wanted your life to focus on communication?
Well, I can't imagine not focusing one's life on communication because it's such a key determinant of health and happiness and career success. But I knew when I was a kid, I was in preschool, and my teacher sent a note home saying, "Today, Michelle asked the teachers to step out in the hall." And I think I was about 4. And what I wanted to tell the teachers was that the techniques they were using with a little boy who had a lot of energy, David, maybe weren't going to be the most effective. And that I had another idea for how they might approach him to help him rein in his behavior and learn. And my mom kind of chuckled at that note, back to when they used to pin notes to your shirt. I don't know if they do that anymore, to make sure the note got home to the parents, So she read that and said, maybe you're going to want to do something along those lines someday. Maybe you'll be a teacher.
Do you still have the note, Michelle?
I found it in the back of a closet in a musty box, yeah.
You still have it today?
Yeah, and I realized they used to call me Shelley then, and I must have been in the frog classroom because it was on a frog.
Oh, wow, okay.
It was on a frog, yeah.
How things progress.
Artifacts.
And then growing up, went to a very good school, 1st through 8th grade, and they always had behavioral indicators on after your grade. They would have like a number, and you could have a number like number 4 is helps classmates learn, and I kept getting the number, I think it was 16, which was socializes at the wrong time. And I could never shake that. And my parents were very much advocates of education and told me that was the most important thing, that no one can ever take your education from you. So they definitely raised lifelong learners, but we couldn't shake that. So again, back to Mom. And one of the reasons I dedicate my book, Communicate with Courage, to her, she started reframing. And she said, well, if you're going to always be talking, maybe there's something in this for you in a career, And now I fly around the country and I'm teaching either locally in Northeast Indiana or somewhere in the U.S. every day, or writing training material. So it came true. I wouldn't change it for the world.
So when these people say, well, we have a problem with communication, we need help with communication, holy smokes. Oh, how broad is that? I mean, when you think about that.
So broad. And I agree with you, Merle. Every climate assessment, every needs assessment we've done for the last 25 years in thousands of organizations, the number one concern of employees and also management is our communication needs help. And I think it's because humans are emotional, political, social creatures, and we all can't help but bring ourselves to work. We bring our function and our dysfunction. So we tend to design surveys and we do some qualitative work, we do quantitative work. We might do one-on-one interviews or conduct an online or in-person survey, but we try to get to the heart of what do you need more or less of? And generally speaking, we need more information. The employees want more information from top management. And top management, the middle of the org chart, as well as front-facing frontline employees, are asking for more recognition and praise for what they do well.
Now, when we think about safety professionals,
yes,
and Jay, you went to school in undergraduate studying safety, and we're a part of that. But I think that many people that get out into the field and start working in safety do not realize the need and the power of their ability to communicate. And so, Michelle, when you're thinking broadly of your experiences that you've ever had with somebody in safety or imagining that role, talk to us about how the safety professional has to be mindful of being how I communicate to people.
Well, the safety professional and all adjunct professions need to remember that their name is their legacy, and that's something that motivates me every time I send a text or reread an email to make sure it's tight and right before I hit send. We have to be thinking about how others are feeling when we communicate with them. And in executive coaching, one of my favorite goals to assign to leaders who come into our programs is I ask them to pick one day in the weeks that we'll be apart. We usually do one coaching session per month for a couple hours, and it results in 5 to 6 goals on average. And one of those goals is I'd like you to just pick a day, Jay, anytime in the next few weeks, log who you communicate with and how you left them feeling. And that's a very interesting report that comes back. Starts with my employees. I did a shift meeting and I had a safety update. Then I talked to the plant manager. Then I needed to talk to the HR manager about hiring someone. Then I had 2 interviews. How did you leave each of those people feeling? It's very eye-opening. And people tend to say, well, I was talking to my spouse about this or my partner, and they said, yeah, what about how you leave me feeling? So when we start to look at how we behave as communicators in the sending and receiving of messages at work, it can impact our personal life in wonderful ways as well. If we're brave enough to look, that's what's missing. I think sometimes the courage, thus communicate with courage.
I'm brave enough to look right now, and I have half of me is really happy and half of me is really sad with what you just said. Because
then you're human, so welcome to the club. Because, researchers estimate we make 2,000 to 3,000 decisions per day. Many of those related to how we listen or how we send messages. Mm-hmm. And you're not gonna have 100% there, right?
I have 100%.
Yeah.
Because I know what the goal is.
That keeps you in the game. The tough part is to keep loving yourself despite the weaknesses. And I think of it like when we teach business writing, we ask participants to route out to look for their sins, in quotation marks, as writers, because those hang with you lifelong. I know that I can use run-on sentences because I'm obviously a lover of words. So every email I send, I need to watch for certain things, much like when we speak to people or our body language when we listen. Once you figure out where your weaknesses are, then you're off and running. And the hard part I find is to love oneself despite the weaknesses.
So that's a very strong human approach to communication that you're describing. I am overconfident in my communication ability because I almost 100% depend on Grammarly to help me write emails in tone, correction, and I never think of the human aspect about how I'm making someone feel. It's all
subject, predicate, object. Is this correct?
Self-centered, perfect grammar, using the right button to say knowledge, expert. What am I trying to say? And I'm like, oh, I'm doing great with my communication because Grammarly tells me I'm 9900. And I think that's something that we lack in an early part of our career as EHS professionals, as Merle said, to articulate our thoughts and communicate with clarity in a way that you're describing, which is leaving people with a really special feeling.
If I could give one recipe to our listeners and learners for great communication, it would be kind of how you mix up a vinaigrette for your salad. You want to use about equal parts oil and equal parts vinegar. Mix that up and you're good to go for the most part throughout your days and nights. And those 2 ingredients for great communication are, first, directness. We have to be able to say the hard thing and say it straight. And then we also need, in most cases, an equal amount of empathy and respect for others' feelings. So it's almost like we want a hardness and a softness at the same time. We want courage, directness, assertiveness, not aggressiveness, but assertiveness. And then at the same time, we want to be mixing in empathy for how others are feeling after we communicate. And what I like to do with audiences large and small, just a show of hands, we could have 2,000 people in an auditorium. How many of you think that you lean towards or are more gifted in being assertive? And about half, for the last many, many years, about half the hands in the room go up. And how many of you are very good at being careful with people's feelings so that you're not leaving others feeling less than. And about half the hands in the room go up. And then it seems to me that we all know what we should do when we leave this room or when we stop listening to this podcast. We should dial up whatever we have less of in our communication style. Turn the amp up a little bit.
Oftentimes that is really speaking the truth with love and a measure of empathy with that. Now, I want to hit a hot button that's never been touched on this podcast yet.
Uh-oh.
And that is that if Michelle, I'd like to, I'm going to see what Jay first. What his
Okay,
opinion
thank
is.
you. I think
And then
you're
I'll
taking
come
it
to-
easy on me there.
Yeah. So
You're up, Jay.
Yep.
if you found out what the most common adjective is, most common description is of a safety presentation, what is the most common term that people use to describe safety presentations? In your opinion, it is?
Passionate.
You've been listening to the wrong radio station.
Heartfelt.
He's a positive thinker.
He is.
There you go.
Would you like to guess?
I would like to guess both sides of the fence. Helpful is what I hope it is. Dry is what I think it might be.
The most common I run across is boring.
Merle.
Yes. Now, they haven't been to your safety talks, Jay. But for many people, they find boring, irrelevant. They just say, get me out of this. I'd rather pull my fingernails off than having to listen to these people.
Save me, Michelle.
When's the last time you listened with intention and mindfulness and excitement to the briefing before your plane takes off? I have my rock and roll, I have my Tom Petty in my ears before we take off. I have no idea. I knew what they were saying the first time I flew. So yeah, you're right. Presentation skills should be honed by safety pros.
They should, because we're talking about the
That's
most
true.
valuable thing, people's well-being and life-giving. And what we often say is dry, dead bones. Michelle, what's some ideas that you could give to the people who are standing up on a regular basis, oftentimes speaking to the same audience over and over again, and they have some material that may not always be woohoo?
But it's life or death sometimes material.
What
Yep.
ideas come to your mind about helping that?
Oh, I think everybody should go to their local Walmart or Target or CVS and buy a simple file folder that costs about 19 cents and then write on the tab where you can title it Spice and make that their Spice folder. And then anything that crosses their inbox or their mailbox or their mind or the newspaper or their favorite newsletter, or they see a quote or they hear a song or a comic strip and it makes them react in some way emotionally, that goes into the Spice file. And I started doing that when I was 18 and started presenting right around there. And since then, now, of course, I have an office full of what you might call Spice file, and any topic of the 12 that I teach, if it's business writing or presentation skills or conflict management or stress management or change management or performance evaluation, whatever that is, I can go to my Spice file and think about the audience and what might also resonate with them. But I've coached presenters with topics that you might think, are you kidding? People are going to be asleep in 5 minutes. And when they bring in their note from their kid, or they have on the slide deck up on the PowerPoint screen a quote from a sports great that they admire, everybody comes in thinking about that. And then the next challenge, most presenters can find something to put in a Spice file and then bring to an audience of 2 or 2,000. However, the real pros always tie whatever the extracurricular piece is to the topic of the presentation. And that's not so hard to do. You know, it could be anything. I tell people, if you're into knitting, bring your knitting needles or tell us a knitting story. You have to make it relate. I was so excited. I saw a client who wants to get better at presentation skills recently. He's a CFO in his organization. And he came in and he said, I want you to watch me and, you know, as my executive coach, give me feedback. And I said, I'd love to. And I planned to take 2/3 a page of notes, I hoped, about what he was doing well, and 1/3 a page, a couple bullet points about what could be better. And I was thrilled because he had the guts to start with humor. And we all appreciate someone who's going to use appropriate for the workplace humor, right? Never directed at your audience, never off color. PG is about as racy as you want to get, right? And he said, okay, everybody, thanks for coming to the financial presentation for Q1. And so I got a joke for you. Man walks into a bar. There's a horse at the bar. And he goes on to tell this joke. And I'm like, oh, I'm writing. This is wonderful. I'm so proud of you. You're really stretching. You're out of your comfort zone. This is everybody's leaning forward, etc. He got a laugh. And then he turned and said, so profit and loss. And I thought, wait, what about the horse and the man at the bar? You have to tie those things together. And it wouldn't be that hard. So audience analysis is important. And starting your spice file is important.
So it is that idea of spice. It's also realizing that just preparing the documentation, the information is not enough. You have to prepare the way you present. So we get back to the Carnegie principle of the idea of dramatize your ideas. Jay, what else you want to add to that?
I'm curious, your journey to self-improvement, what motivates you? Obviously, your family of origin is very important to you, but that journey towards self-improvement, as you're probably continually doing, what was that like? How did it manifest itself after your mother and your parents and your upbringing, and why do you still have that drive today?
I have had the blessing and the curse, I suppose, of losing a lot of people I love very young, when I was young and they were young. So when I was 19, my brother passed away, I lost a niece, and I lost my mom. And that really woke me up to the fact, the cold, hard, and beautiful fact that we are only here for 7 or 8 decades if we're lucky. Mm-hmm. So those 2,000 to 3,000 decisions we make per day as safety leaders, as people listening and sending and receiving messages, it matters. And I've also noticed how much just a simple thumbs up can lift somebody up. Could I read just a page from the book about that? Okay.
Sure. Great segue.
About, I guess, how precious a few words can be. Let's see. If you shy away from risk, this is from chapter 2, Understand Risk to Improve Your Relationships and Career. If you shy away from risk, you shy away from your potential. Your legacy won't live on with as much impact, and what folks remember about you will lack the lift that may have carried them forward. I've never stood at a memorial service and heard anyone fondly recall how the departed was great at going along to get along, and they managed to never make any waves. Speaking of small talk at funerals, ugh. There's a Harley owner out there. In fact, he owned a Harley dealership in my hometown, who approached me at my nonconformist, motorcycle-loving, and life-loving big brother Mike's funeral when I was 19. Mike was 7 years older than me, a 6'4" electrical lineman with long black hair. He must have had a lot of friends because the place was packed. A buddy of his came up and stood squarely in front of me at the stuffy funeral home, where everyone was dressed up, and he was wearing black leather head to toe. He proudly proclaimed, "Don't you worry now, little Shelley. Your brother's got his knees in the breeze up there in Harley heaven." I recall he was wearing an American flag bandana on his head. People stopped talking and stared at us. I grinned. His courageous communication, deemed very inappropriate by some, hit the mark with me completely. I've recalled it fondly, playing it over and over in my mind for many years. It took him about 30 seconds and probably wasn't a big deal to him, but it was to me. It helped heal my broken heart. And so that's what motivates me. I think about how you're going to be feeling tonight about this interview. I hope that I can bring a little something that motivates you to try something different and experiment a bit as a communicator. Or maybe, be brave, call home, go home and say, yeah, I was talking about communication with this author today, and she dared me to ask you, what's something you like about living with me or working with me, and what's something that you sometimes wish I could do better?
What are some things that you think that we need to remember when we're in with the group, when we're out among the people, so that we leave that mark of not just, oh, he's a great communicator, she's a great communicator, but we make an impression?
Sure. I'll give you 4 that just come to top of mind. Be brave enough to make eye contact and hold eye contact. I've toured many plants, facilities, and factories with the general manager or plant manager, And I look at those guys and gals on the fork trucks, and I know that they're watching every step we take. Number one, why is there a consultant in the building? We have some, I'm probably designing training of some sort, but we need to make sure everyone knows nobody's getting fired because we're looking at professional development. As I watch us do the walkthrough, I see every employee ready to say something if that leader looks over and says something, and then most of the time they do not. So we wrap up the tour, get back to the office, and I'm in the position where I need to communicate with courage and diplomacy and say, hey, Merle, can I give you a little feedback about that walkthrough? Oh, yeah, isn't our voice picking great? And yeah, that's all great. But I noticed about 20 people watching you move by, and we didn't say hello, and I wasn't introduced, and I didn't feel it wasn't really my position to do so. So eye contact, and a couple leaders have told me, it's because, Michelle, I can't remember names. And I said, I can't either. That's okay. You can do, hi, how are you today? Doing a good job. You can still do the contact, or you can say, please remind me of your name. But I think it's better to recognize.
Do you, I'm laughing because my immediate evaluation of that is that person is not spending enough time on the factory floor with his people knowing what things are going on. Is that your perception? Because I can walk through a factory floor and not remember anybody's name, but I can talk to every person and I remember sort of what they do and what they're doing, and they remember me, and I'm like, I can't remember her name, but I'm going to say, oh, it's so good to see you again.
I'll say, can you remind me of your first name, as if I know their last?
I'm too scared. I'm too scared.
It could be that we have 30 new temp workers on second shift, and so that shift supervisor should know those people.
But do you instantly pick up upon that? Like, you have that awkward feeling that you're describing. Yeah.
Silliness. Back we go to be willing to be silly to improve the communication. There's so much more we can do to improve relationships and our workplace if we are willing to take the first step, if we are willing to be the one that states how we feel or states intention.
And that is the idea that we think everybody's really interested in us and how we feel. They really don't. They're absorbed in themselves, which is not, I'm just saying that's human.
They have their things on their mind.
Yeah. And Jay, I've seen the same thing when I've walked with people and they say, oh, well, let me take you on a tour. And it's like, they will say hi to people. And it's like these people are shocked that someone would say hi to them. So I believe that, Michelle, what you're saying is when you go out and walk among the people, take the time to look at them. At least give a word of greeting. If you can remember the name, great. But at least give some kind of greeting.
How are you today? Thanks for being here today.
Something simple like that. Yes.
All right, here are a couple more. Your joking and your sarcasm might not be funny to the person who's laughing with you at your joke, because one of the common stress responses in humans is to laugh, even when you've insulted them.
What about if I make fun of myself a bit?
I like it. The most important qualifier there, a bit, because we want to trust you and we want to know you know your stuff. And so if you present yourself as a bumbling fool, we will believe you. So good point, good teaching point. Some of my clients, I'll ask them to think about the percentage of time they want to spend talking. You're going to go out and make sure everyone's using their personal protective equipment. You're going to go bring everyone into the safety briefing. Fantastic. Once you get to that briefing, how much time do you have? And they'll say, I have a half an hour. Okay. How much time are you going to spend talking versus taking questions, asking how things are going, and getting their input? Oh, I never thought about that. I said, all right, well, can I talk to your people? Yeah. Go talk to people. Oh, not much. He says, are there any questions? But that's when it's time to get out there and work. So we only have from 9 to 9:30. And at 9:29 and 59 seconds, he says, any questions? Anything you want to add? And we all say no. Also, we don't want the meeting to go any longer. So we'll work on that. And maybe that safety professional will say to me, I have most of the information, and this is my job, and I'm the one who has the education. So I am doing the teaching here. But I could see it being more like 85%, 15%. Now, great. And that changes how the meeting rolls. And sometimes what I like to do to remind myself to zip it and let others speak and share and teach and ask questions, I'll say, okay, now on this topic, we're going to play or pass. Here we go. So Dr. J, play or pass. If you play, you give us an example. And if you pass, nothing's coming to mind or you don't have a question. And that way, every introvert in the room also is invited to step up and speak. My team is a team of 7. Everybody's more introverted than me. And we have really become a tight, cohesive team that knows, well, we know each other's mannerisms now so well. And we, of course, read each other's personality assessments that we retake every couple of years, looking at how we're growing and changing.
What would be your advice? And I've been through this several times. You take the personality assessment, your team takes it, and then you're supposed to go back and integrate that into your approach, your leadership style, how you show up, how you level up every day. What's your advice on how to do that that's not mechanical?
Why would it be mechanical?
Because it feels so mechanical.
It feels like you've been categorized. Like you go stand in the corner with the other analysts, and I'll be over here with the drivers.
Yeah. You party people over there, you extroverts.
Get the data people over here.
But how do you bring it to? Maybe the question I'm really asking is, how do you take it? I got to go learn my team. I know my team, but I don't know them like this. Like it says, how do you put that plan to action? That's not. I mean, I got to read yours. I got to read yours. There's the mechanics of reading everybody's.
Yeah.
And there's the application of this is what it says and this is what they are. How do I put that into action that's effective? Is it relentless grinding work and interpersonal work? How do you do that with your team?
Relentless interest in understanding how others view the world, because you're coming from one limited perspective, your own. But when we do half day understanding diverse personality styles, we incorporate ways to appreciate each of the 4 styles. And then there are thousands of other variables, but the 4 main styles, driver, expressive, analyst, and amiable. Or if you're a disc person, that's dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. You'll notice that these traits, no matter what you call them, there are 4 main styles, right?
Break it down to 4 and you start
Break it down to 4 and start there and think, what does the analyst value? Oh, first of all, who am I? And I know myself to be a driver expressive, or in disc, DI. So, okay, that's how I view the world. I want to get a lot done in a short time if possible, and I want to do it through building relationships. Now, who are these other humans on the planet with me or on my team? And then you start to think about it. Well, okay, an analyst values different things than me. I value data. I value quality control and, of course, accuracy of data. But they value it even more. So what's going to be important to them? So when I go drop in their office and say, hey, Merle, let's talk about this, and I want an answer from him now, it's the most uncomfortable thing in the world for him. I've learned finally in my 5th decade of life to understand his personality and say, here's a couple notes. Can you ponder this? Maybe by the end of the week, I'd love for you to give me a vote, yay or nay, or your thoughts on this, what might go wrong, what could go right. And he'll take that and appreciate that. So I've studied the personality styles so I can teach them, but man, has it helped me in personal and professional life as well.
How do you not get steamrolled in your day-to-day operations where you constantly come back to that with your team in life?
I don't think we have to worry about that. That's like saying, what if I drive the speed limit so well 100% of the time that I accidentally slip a mile under the limit? I don't think we're going to do that, because as what Merle said, we all come back to our own stress, what's on our shoulders, our own ego, our own needs and desires and wants. I think we're okay if we just think once in a while, how might I want to change up my style? Not change who you are. You're right where you're supposed to be, by the way, with your weaknesses and strengths. It's a twisty journey, this communication improvement journey. You're where you're supposed to be, as long as you're continuing to pick up clues along the way and pay attention to the fact that others perceive the world differently from you, and that is not wrong. And they have had very different experiences than you have.
And this is where, when you look at the Dale Carnegie principles, of the 30 human relations principles, over half of them use the word other person, other person. And Michelle, what you were just saying is, rather than us just saying is, I'm going to go in and tell it how I feel, or the way I say it, to stop long enough and to think about the other person and how they're receiving it and how they accept things. And then when you think about all these ways, let the other person do a great deal of talking. That went back to your idea of the gentleman that was conducting the meeting, and he was talking all the whole time. And there's all these things, and what those principles remind us of that's so valuable for the safety professional is it's not all about you. Let them have a chance. And Michelle, there's a certain part of communication that really demands a focus on the other person, and that's listening. Because safety professionals are well schooled. They've learned their stuff. And they want to go out and just gush it out. Give us a couple of ideas about listening.
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle. Give us a couple ideas
great.
as a safety professional in the room here.
This is also my Achilles heel. I love to talk. I have found that getting centered within and taking a couple deep breaths and trying to get grounded helps me remain in the moment without planning what I'm going to say next. But as soon as I'm disappointed or pissed off or I feel threatened in some way or not heard, I notice it's harder to pull that off. So this is about emotional regulation and self-control and listening also for what's not being said. And you know, the studies that we've done and that I've seen about wording, voice, and body language. So when I teach presentation skills, I ask audiences, what do you think is most important when you give a presentation? Are you focused on wording, your voice, or your body language, voice tone or body language? And everybody says wording. I don't want to get up there and I don't want to drop my note cards. I don't want to lose my train of thought. And I want them to know that actually what research is showing is it's your tone and your body language that matters most.
Albert Moravian.
Are you excited to be there to give us this briefing or not? Did you bring something from your spice file or not? We can hear it. And so all around the United States, I'm flying and driving. I might be doing harassment and bias prevention for the umpteenth time. We started teaching that in 1997. And I sit in my car or sit in the plane or sit in the conference room and psych myself up. This is what it means to be an American. Everybody needs to be reminded about the law and also how to go better and above the law to be inclusive and to accept diverse thought and diverse practices and diverse lifestyles so that we can come together in the great melting pot that is America and give everybody a chance to be heard. And I'm pretty much ready to go in singing Stars and Stripes Forever before I get mic'd up. When I woke up that morning, my first thought might have been, oh boy, a mandatory audience of people busted by the EEOC perhaps and told that they have to do this training. And I'm going to get a lot of the scowls on the faces and the arms crossed, and we don't want to listen to this. But I asked them, how do you want your loved ones treated in the workplace? What if something happens to them? You need to know how to advise them what to do if any kind of discrimination happens to them. I try to find different truthful hooks to get people involved in every topic, right? And so I'm checking my wording. I didn't think about that much on the drive down. My body language, I didn't think about what I was going to do with my hands, et cetera. I thought about what tone do I want to bring to this interview and how can I be of service to the safety community? And I sure hope they feel the love and feel encouraged to admit when their significant other says, you do this, instead of saying, no, I don't, to maybe say, maybe I do. I'll think about it.
So when the safety professional listens to the person on the floor, listens to their peers.
Yep.
What's the message behind the message of listening? What are we really saying to someone when we listen?
I think we're saying, I value you and I see you as an equally relevant, important human being. Back we go to the soul level.
Yes.
And you know who can figure that out? 3-year-olds. You know who else? 103-year-olds can sense when there's something off in the energy. And I think it might be past our lifetimes, but we're going to be able to measure communicators' energy at some point.
There's one other area that, before we wrap up, that I'd like us to delve into, and that is the power of stories. When people use stories in training meetings or even one-on-one communication. And Michelle, I believe that in our pre-call, you told a story about someone that you saw that was was it a fire department? And the way
right. Yep. That was incident command training.
Would you talk to us for a moment, set the stage of the power stories, and then how that story you heard affected you?
Yes. I'll give you 2 stories if that's okay. And I'm now going to summon my communication powers and be succinct. I had the honor of going out to Philadelphia to present as part of an incident command class, 20-some hour training required for firefighters. And they wanted an hour on critical communication, what to do in crisis as a communicator. And before I went up to teach my part, I was watching my friend teach about safe live ammonia releases. And we were heading out to a parking lot that day to do an ammonia release. And he as he tried to make sure that we all understood the danger that would be present in this ammonia release, as well as the education and opportunity that would be present to get our hands on something like this, right? Suited up, et cetera. He talked about a dear friend of his who almost lost his life in a similar incident and how much that meant to him. And he teared up as he was talking. The gentleman survived. And he teared up as he was talking about this, and you could have heard a pin drop. And, you know, this is not maybe the softest crowd or the most emotionally, demonstrative crowd, let's just say. They're tough.
This is in Philadelphia.
Tough guys, tough guys, that do tough jobs, yeah. And he had us in the palm of his hand. I talked about how I find myself sometimes teaching topics that people don't necessarily want to look at. And I'll share an NFL story if I could, since we were on fantasy football. This has to do with my own defining to be right, thinking I know somebody because I know a little bit about them and being dead wrong. I'll share an NFL story. This is from Chapter 7, Settling for Good Enough, one of the 4 hidden challenges. A few years ago, I met with a Seattle Seahawk who wanted coaching to orchestrate a career change. I was stuck in defining to be right mode. I accepted the work, but I harbored doubt that he wouldn't work as hard as my regular clients. I put regular in quotation marks because what does that even mean? There's my bias. Thinking maybe his impressive sports status as an NFL player would mean he's going to expect me to do most of the work. I was so wrong. His work ethic was outstanding. And why wouldn't it be? Look at the heights he reached in his first career as a running back, his first career, football. I'm sharing this with you because, 1, admitting my bias is an exercise in vulnerability. A key component to getting great as a communicator is being vulnerable. And 2, so I'm less likely to prejudge someone again based on their other achievements or lack thereof. On any given day, folks in our coaching programs are in the middle of executing goal plans containing pro moves to help them take brave risks in their companies. These are regular people, leaders like you and me. And one of the attributes that makes them a leader is a simple fact that they recognize their action or inaction impacts themselves and others. We call what we do executive coaching, not because we only work with C-suite clients, but because we all deserve to be treated like executives, listened to and approached like executives. All of us should enjoy the feeling of people being respectful when they speak to us.
And that's part of the power of communication. And stories are certainly things as they're trying to communicate truths that help people remember, because people will remember stories long after they forget the slides that are flashed up in front of them. So we have had a very interesting time period here of working together, talking about communication. Michelle, as we're wrapping things up, what's a final thought that you would like to just encourage safety people to think about in the way they communicate?
I just want to encourage them to take some time to reflect on the value of what they bring to this world and how absolutely critical their jobs are, and to set some personal goals for improvement as a communicator. And if I can be of any help, we've got a ton of free resources on our website, and that's at GladieuxConsulting.com, an impossible French last name to spell. I imagine you guys will have show notes, but it's GLADIEUX, like X-ray, consulting.com. And during the pandemic, we didn't have audiences to teach. So we just kept writing and putting all kinds of tools, Coach's Corner, question and answer, downloadable exercises, research summaries. There's more there for you if we got you interested in looking at yourself as a communicator today.
Great. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Taking us
Great
on the
work.
journey talking about this.
You bet.
Well, we just heard a lady, Michelle, who has focused her life learning and learned experiences of how to improve in communication and help other people. There's a reservoir of tips and ideas to get.
Yeah, I think that was one of the best conversations I've ever been a part of as a safety professional, to focus on influencing and communicating with people.
Because, Jay, most people, again, go to school to learn all the regulations and then forget to focus on the idea, how do I communicate these ideas effectively?
Thanks for listening to My Big Safety Challenge. a podcast produced in partnership by Dale Carnegie and BCSP, with your hosts Dale Carnegie Master Trainer Merle Heckman and Jay Harf, Vice President of Global Environment, Health, Safety, and Sustainability at Xylem. Executive produced by Charlie Eltringham. The supervising producer is Joel Burgai. Directed by Jiachi Liu. Edited by Jared Griot and Kyla Anderson. Editorial support from Brandon Mohawk. Social media support from Braylon Morgan and Evelyn Baku. Consulting producers are Colin Brown and Mark Sullivan. To have new episodes delivered directly to you, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are downloaded. If you would like to share your story of a safety leadership challenge you faced, email us at info@mybigsafetychallenge.com. See you next time.